So would like to now introduce the first of the user stories this afternoon, and Luís Junqueira from the University of Lisbon. The floor is yours, Luís. Thank you for your user story.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about our study. Our study is related to climate change. Of course, it's a study about sustainability practices in Portugal. So the study was not only done by me, but with the authorship of also these 5 other fine people, my colleagues from ICS, University of Lisbon. Importantly as well, the study was funded by Missão Continente. Missão Continente is a sort of social responsibility branch of Continente, which is one of Portugal's major retailers. So it's a big retail company. They own several supermarkets throughout the country, clothes stores, electronic stores. So it's one of the big Portuguese companies and one of the major retailers. So they have this social responsibility branch that is focusing recently on issues of sustainability, and they have funded this study by ICS. So we had full scientific freedom to develop the study. That didn't interfere at all with the study's formulation, with the formulation of the questions. So there's full scientific freedom in the study's design. But the company did a lot to promote this, because it's also in their own interest to promote the role in funding the study. So they had a big role in helping promote our results and give them a big better visibility in media. As you can see, we have a couple of examples of the presentation event that had some important personalities, members from the government present there, and there was also a big highlight in the media that highlighted some of our major results, like that Portuguese people are available to reduce meat consumption, if that has a positive outcome in terms of combating climate change. So I highlight this to say that I think outreach and dissemination was always one of our core values in the study. So the positive is that there was not so much as an imposition coming from these new open science regulations that are starting to pop up in universities, but that was seen by us as part of our outreach strategy as well, along with promoting and disseminating the results themselves. So we think that the transition towards more sustainable practices is very important in meeting greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. So I think that's our study by providing data. It's also part of our role when we produce this data to make it available for decision makers, for companies, and for civil society organizations that are the ones in the field trying to promote these changes. So it's very important for them to have quality information available, and I think it's part of our role to make that information available for them, not only in terms of results and reports, but also by providing raw data for them to use for their own purposes. So in terms of depositing the data, making that data accessible, so we had 2 databases to deposit because there were 2 studies, one in 2016 and one in 2018. So there's 2 cross-sectional studies based on face-to-face interviews with 1,600 cases from residents in Portugal. So it was I think it was very important to have the support from our national repository, from our CESSDA partner in Portugal, from APIs, and to have a national repository in Portugal because it's part of, as I said, our mission of reaching out our stakeholders. It's important to have in mind that the mostly English-speaking research community is obviously an important public for open data, but I don't think it should be seen as the only one. I think we should see this broad range of stakeholders as part of also the public, of the people who can be interested in accessing this data. And I think having national repositories is important in terms of, because language can be a real barrier for some of these stakeholders. And I think this also have proximity and institutional trust is also important. So when these national organizations can be very important in reaching out to these other publics. Continuing, I think making the data accessible is obviously an important guiding principle in promoting open science. So I think that organizations, from my experience contacting with Patricia and with APIR, I think organizations in the CESSDA consortium have a very important role in not only in supporting researchers, but also in educating them in how to adopt these fair practices, findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable practices for sharing this data. And I think we really benefited from this close support, because there were many clarifications and for many of the uses for many of the terms used in many of the guidelines, and I think it was very important to have this close support when we for our data deposit procedure. So because I think that institutions are already creating some very clear guidelines for open access for publication, for instance. I think it's something that has been popping up in our universities over these last few years, but I think not much attention is given to primary data, and I think that so as a consequence, I think that the incentives for researchers, that's something that we have in mind for career progression. So the things that we target in our activities are not, I think, yet fully in line with open data practices when it comes to making data itself, not only the results, the publications open. So I think there's also a role that CESSDA and its component organizations can really have a role in. So when depositing the data and preparing the data for the deposits, I think that there are a couple of challenges that I think that we had, and I think are very important to highlight. And I think as well, support was very important in overcoming these challenges. One is, I think, control vocabularies are as Patricia said, are a very important aspect of making this data discoverable and accessible and ready for reuse. But it can be challenging for other researchers to fit some data into categories. Researchers are often very precise about how the work is classified, and trying to fit it in a more general framework. For example, for the topics and the keywords can lead to some attrition and some doubts. And so, for example, our research was about consumers and consumption, and sociologists are very cautious about classifying their work as being about behavior. So that was the only category that was accessible. So that consumption and consumer behavior was the only one accessible to talk about consumption, and we chose that. But there was some doubts about using that category or omitting it, because behavior is not something that, for example, economists, people in economics or in psychology are very use behavior often as a term to describe the work they do, but sociologists are quite cautious about using that word. So that was one of the attritions or challenges that we found when preparing the data. Access and licensing was also
1 minute, Luís, thanks.
Sorry, also custom issues. I think it's, of course, we should keep data as accessible as possible, but we have to respect the participants' privacy and expectations. And I think researchers are not sufficiently encouraged to think about data access when they design their studies. So it's somehow of an issue for this in the future when we are collecting data, when we are negotiating with our participants. And I think some of the support that is provided, I think, for example, standardized consent forms can be very useful when preparing our consent, when preparing for consent, and to explain to our participants how the data will be used. But they can have blind spots. One particularly that we found with our data was the question of commercial use. So our forms didn't explicitly talk about commercial use, so we had some doubts if we should allow it in a license, but because we couldn't be sure if it was within the expectations of the people that participated in the study, answered the survey. And so that is it. Thank you all for your attention, and I hope that I was able to highlight some of the challenges of as a researcher trying to deposit data for the first time. And I'm open to all your questions. Thank you.